Hey guys, Brent here and welcome to another Mailman's Postie Adventures. In this episode, we talk about the risks involved in this dangerous voyage that Outback Mike is about to take in his dugout canoe. The sharks, the crocodiles are getting smashed on the reef. But before we get into the risks, I want to go over there and photograph him in a way that I see him, that represents who he is and what he's about to do. Let's get into it. Hey guys, Brent Mail here. People call me the Mailman. I'm a pro photographer traveling around Australia on my little Postie bike, finding interesting people who are passionate about what they're doing and telling their stories through my lens. So buckle up and join me on my Postie adventures into the unknown. So as usual, I have to be very careful about what I take because my Postie bike, I can only fit so much in the back. So the video camera, yes, got that, good to go. The shotgun mic, there it is with the dead cat on it, put it in. My main camera with my 50mm on the front, there it's ready to go. I film with this camera sometimes, and here's my 24mm. And I film with that one too, but I can shoot stills with them too, so that's great. Let's pop that in. Alright, so I'm taking a few extra lenses. So my 17-40, my super wide angle, I've got an ND filter on the front of that. My 85mm, which is great for portraits, so let's take that one too. And then this is one of my favorite lenses, my 135mm, which is excellent for portraits. So I might shoot with those three also. So let's pop those in. Now I'm taking two tripods, one for my flash and one for the video camera when I film myself. And here's something extra I wanted to take on this trip because I think I might need it. So my flash and then this remote trigger which controls the flash. A really good tip is put it into a sock to protect it. That way you don't scratch it up and break it on the trip over. There we go, it all fits in. Oh, excellent. Let me head over and photograph Outback Mike. I arrive at Mike's place. Looks like he's working on the sails. It's a perfect time to photograph him. The weather is changing. We've got clouds coming over. There's been some rain, some showers, then bright sunlight, and then clouds again. And I'm photographing Mike. I want to get the still image that tells the story of what he's about to do. Now, he's about to do this epic, dangerous voyage, so I want to create something a little more dramatic. So what I'm doing is I'm popping in some fill flash. So I've got my friend Harlan over there helping me. He's running around with the flash, and so off-camera flash. It's remote control from the trigger on the top of my camera. So as I shoot the image, this trigger triggers this flash and the flash goes off. Now, I'm photographing at one stop underexposed on a bright sunny day. How do I do that? I've got a 3-stop neutral density filter on the front of this lens to darken the light coming in. All right, let me stop the edit there and just explain this another way. I want to capture Mike with a very shallow depth of field, and I want to pop in flash on a bright sunny day. So with photography, there's a couple of problems here. With a very shallow depth of field, it means I need to open up the aperture of my lens. Opening up the aperture of my lens lets in a lot more light, okay? So if I'm shooting at f3.2, which is a pretty wide open aperture on this lens, normally on a bright sunny day, it's going to be 1/1000th of a second shutter speed or 1/2000th of a second shutter speed, which with a flash, it will not sync up the flash. The fastest I can photograph this camera with the flash is 1/180th of a second, not 1,000th of a second. So there's my problem. I can close down the aperture and photograph at 1/180th of a second at f16 or something, but then I lose that shallow depth of field. So with photography, there's always this trade-off of depth of field versus shutter speed, right? So how do I do it? I use neutral density filters, which basically darken the light coming in, which allows me to photograph at a much slower shutter speed and a wide open aperture to get that shallow depth of field and pop in flash. So let's show you what neutral density filters are. So here's a 1-stop neutral density filter that lets in half the light. Here's a 3-stop neutral density filter which lets in half, and then half again, and then half again. So 1/8 of the light. And here's a 10-stop neutral density filter that lets in barely any light. You can't even see it through it. So that's what I'm doing so that I can photograph at a slower shutter speed to sync up the flash and a wide open aperture to get a shallow depth of field. Does that make sense? So I want to photograph at different angles. Sometimes I'm laying on the ground, sometimes I'm up, to show some foreground elements. Then I want Mike's face to be tack sharp, and I want to pop flash into his face to give it that dramatic feel with a moody, darkened sky. So if you're part of my Postie Legends, you get access to a few of these original raw images. Plus I got an extra video where I show you how I edit these images to make them pop even more. Photographing with my nifty 50mm lens. So to zoom in and out, I've got to go closer or further back. So that's how you can photograph dramatic portraits in variable, horrible lighting conditions using an off-camera flash. Before jumping into the interview where Mike talks about the dangers of this trip he's about to take, I thought I'd share a couple of my favorite images from this photo shoot. All right, let's have a look at these images. These are the best, I think, from the photo shoot, and I've edited a lot of them as black and whites, but let's just run into this first one. The reason I've got this here is I'm showing my friend Harlan with the flash, the off-camera flash. And I've got Mike looking towards me, and you see the shallow depth of field there. See how Mike's face is in focus and the sail is out of focus. The only problem with this one is he's squinting a little bit, but I think that's quite a nice image just to show you what's going on. I was shooting at 180th of a second, f2.8, so that's wide open, well, very shallow depth of field for that lens. Yeah, I like this one a little bit better. He's looking up at the mast. He's not squinting as much. I think Harlan popped the flash in perfectly here, so that's a great one. All right, this one is definitely one of my favorites. Why? Because to me, this shows Mike how I see him. So he is pretty focused on what he's doing, determined. And it's got a nice leading line with the mast over here. He's got his troopy in the background. He takes it along on his trips. He's looking down and he's pretty focused on what he's doing. So I do like this one. And the lighting looks perfect on his eyes and his face here. Yeah, and it looks pretty sharp, so that's great. So there I'm shooting at 180th of a second, f3.2 with the 3-stop ND filter. Do like this one because of the angle, shooting from low up, and his face is being hit by that flash. And I like the way the knife is catching the light too. This one, yes, I do like it. It's not too bad. I'm just not seeing the knife there, so the knife isn't catching the light. This one, again, the knife's catching the light, so that's a great shot. Really, I think this might be one of my favorites because he's working on the mast here, cutting it with that old knife. I think the light is good. It's dramatic lighting. It's hard, harsh light, and I'm really liking this one. Yeah, that's great. Just shows his focus and his determination. Just didn't catch the light there on the knife, so I might not use that one. Here's one where he's popping up the sail. You can see the flash down there. I haven't edited it out yet. Not sure if I'm going to use this one or not. This one's not too bad. I think just maybe his knee is catching the light too much. But this shows the shallow depth of field. I wanted to have the mast framing him and this outrigger pole kind of framing him, so it draws the viewer's eye to your main point of interest, which is his face. And maybe the flash is a bit low there, so it's got a weird kind of Rembrandt lighting on his on his cheek there, so may not use that one either. And then here's a color one, more of a kind of a happy shot. He's looking up at the mast there, and I think Harlan popped in the right amount of flash at the right time there. And then this one too, looking down the mast, we've got the flash a little bit higher. Thank you, Harlan, for working this one, and yeah, don't mind that one. So there they are. Those are my favorite images, I think, from this photo shoot. Notice how I can get really dramatic images even on a bright sunny day by using off-camera flash and then a 3-stop neutral density filter. What do you think? Which is your favorite image? Please leave me comments below this video. I'd love to know. Let's find out about the dangers of this trip.
Inevitably end up finding yourself in some pretty dangerous situations. I obviously spend most of my time trying to avoid it, that kind of thing. Just because the weather changes and all that kind of stuff is a limit to how much you can control, but most of it comes down to your decision making and your risk management about when to go and when not to go. But one of the things that keeps me up most is being in big seas and getting rolled over and swamped at sea and getting smashed up on a reef. So a lot of that's about picking the times to go, and if the weather's looking really bad, just not moving on that day. But there's sharks all over the place up there. I'll be in the water a lot looking for lobster, and also filming underwater because I want to bring out what's happening to reef with climate change and bleaching and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty freaky being out snorkeling by yourself when there's nobody else around. It's a different feeling with your mates in the barrier reef, but when you're by yourself, it's a risk. Yeah, I'm fairly practiced at making some decisions, but you inevitably find yourself with a choice between two risks which are both pretty high, and you just got to know which is, the best one to take. But even with the best decision making, you can still just get unlucky. So being overconfident is something that I don't actually ever fall into the trap of, because I'm normally the other way. I sort of almost overthink things, but I don't think it is overthinking, because that process is what helps me identify the risks and stops them from killing me, basically. And I've been doing this my whole life, really, these kinds of things, and I've never needed a rescue. I've never busted a bone other than on a ski resort, so that wasn't even on an adventure. So just because I've had a good track record of safety and not needing assistance, certainly doesn't mean that it's not going to happen on this one. And going into it with an attitude, well, how can I avoid that at all costs, is the best way of doing it. There's Crocs all over the place up there. The further north you go, the Crocs get bigger, bolder, and more dangerous, basically. And they haven't been hunted now for 40 years, so there's a lot of them. And I'll be sleeping on this thing at times, and I'm going to try and make some Croc protection. And I might even be locking myself inside the log, with wooden bars across. And my plan is, if a Croc gets on the top and starts trying to chew through the bars, I'll be stabbing it with something sharp. I've already thought that through, and that's quite a survivable thing as long as it doesn't roll me over. So I've actually thought about how I'm going to mitigate that risk with the volume of the floats and that kind of thing. Now, these are risks that probably won't happen, but there's a 2 or 3% chance that might happen. But I reckon I've got a 90% chance of surviving either one of those worst case scenarios, just with previous experience and knowing their behaviour, and what freaks them out and what doesn't. What's gonna kill me is if I just get complacent, and I'm sheltering inside a creek mouth, and I'm sitting up here, and I've just exposed from here on, and a Croc could just come up here behind me whilst I'm staring at my camera gear and just come out and grab me. So I won't put myself in that situation. I'll always make sure I'm somewhere else, like in the centre of the raft with something around me. So the Croc's got to have, it can't just ambush me without notice, because that's what's going to kill you. But, you've got to ask yourself, what's the point of taking such big risks? And really, they are really quite rewarding adventures. You're really sort of getting the most out of life. And yes, I could just not do them and just live a life at home and doing small trips on the weekend and stuff, but life wouldn't be as interesting, and you wouldn't come across so many experiences, so many people, and you just, to get the most out of life, you do have to take a bit of a risk. Some people have different appetites for risk, obviously. I was pretty lucky, I think, because my mum allowed me to learn to manage my own risks without making all the decisions for me. And so I've just got practiced at making those decisions from a young age. I was camping, without adult supervision when I was 13, and, off catching fish and stuff well before I was 10, by myself. So, yeah, it just becomes part of what you do. I think it's the kids these days that don't get any exposure to risk or making their own decisions that aren't able to do it. When they're 18, they leave home and they haven't made many risk decisions. That's when it tends to go wrong.
Wow, that's just crazy. So many risks, and I wish you the best of luck, Mike. I think you're going to need it, and I can't wait to see the video, the whole episode when it's finished, and hopefully you are alive to finish it off so we can actually go on this adventure with you. Hey, one last thing before I go. If you want to be part of my Postie Legends, make sure you click the link below. You get access to all sorts of cool stuff. And if you want to hear more of this interview when it comes to the risks and the crocodiles and everything, stick around after the credits. I've got a few more minutes. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please leave me comments below. This is Brent, the Mailman. Catch you later. Bye. when the croc's climbing on top of your canoe and you're in the little cage there and it's trying to eat you and you stab in it, how are you going to film that?
Good question. So I have a one of those cameras, a trail camera, which I'll have up on the mast. So it'll just detect motion. Now, it might be flat because it sees the ripples on the water and it keeps turning on all night. But I'm also going to have GoPros up around the craft. I've got a GoPro remote in here, which I'll be able to just press to turn on. And my other GoPros are set up on voice command, so I can say, GoPro, start recording, and I'll have it, for that case, I'll have a torch, because this guy wouldn't have had a torch, but in order to show people stuff, the reef underwater, I'm going to have a torch. So I'll just turn the torch on and I'll need it to survive, because I'll have to be fending off this bloody big crocodile. But there's the physics of crocodiles as well. There's certain things that they can't do. Like, they can't be on a flat surface like we're on here and jump, because their body can't twist that way.
Okay.
So there's certain ways, there's limitations to their movement, and that's part of the plan I'll have for hopefully not getting bitten. To me, that risk is manageable, and I've spent a lot of time with Crocs, so it might be like, I don't know, I've just got a lot of ways of mitigating those risks. And I have had Crocs, and I've had to, be aggressive towards them, and if you are able to take an aggressive stance and harm them, then all of a sudden they'll back off. So, it's not without risk, but I can handle that. Yeah. And so people, expose themselves to great risk through complacency in crocodile places. They'll sleep and sit on the beach right next to the water and camp right next to the water without any thought to the risk that they're taking. So at least I know how to mitigate it, and other people don't, and they end up taking more risk than me, but just not knowing.